Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you've joined me. We're going to have a Thanksgiving tea today. And my heart is full of such joy that you have joined me. And if you haven't gotten your tea yet, could you pause and get your tea, and I'll be waiting for you. Well, we have some guests with us today. Every year I bring out my pilgrims, and here are the pilgrim lady, the pilgrim man, and then these are a very special set of pilgrims, the porcelain, just beautiful design. And I have my wonderful Indian princess, my Sacagawea, and I have her right here with us. And I'm just full of so much gratefulness to God for all that He has given us. And though we have had difficulty as a world, as a nation, as a people this last year with all that has been going on, we've also had many, many blessings, haven't we? Yes. And you know, if there hadn't been COVID, I don't know that the Tea Talks would have ever started, because they were inspired by the fact that so many people were locked up, and I felt compelled to bring joy and good news and a cup of tea. And through all these fabulous electronic devices we have, we can connect. It's the most amazing thing. When you ponder to think that the pilgrims, coming on the boat in 1620, they didn't even have, at that point, any kind of mechanical device. The ocean mariners, they had to know the stars, and they might have had a very crude compass, but everything was so hands-on. And when they walked off the boat, they were on foot. They didn't even have horses. It's so hard for us to imagine, but let's pour out. And I brought some special little cups today that I thought looked kind of like Thanksgiving. And I brought 3 because I thought one for you, one for me, and one for a friend. So I will just pour one, and I have them sitting on this darling tea trivet that is, it's the British seal. It's very, very special. It's got the lion and the unicorn and the crown, but it's very, very practical because it keeps the tray up off the table so that, you don't burn the wood on the table, right? Okay, so I thought a special pot today that is really old in its design. I have a pot here that from my family, from my great-grandmother, that I don't know how to prove it, but she said it was from Paul Revere. He was a silversmith, and he was later than the Pilgrims, but not much later. And I'll bring that pot out someday and show you. But this pot reminds me of it. And on top is the acorn, or it almost looks like a pumpkin. It's perfect for Thanksgiving. And I'm going to have a little splash of cream. And I really wanted to have my whole table set for you like I would set my Thanksgiving table, but it's just so difficult with my limitations of my camera. So we'll have to just have a little miniature. And these are special flowers given to me from one of my darling little tea girls named Ella. Thank you, Ella, and her mother, Jessie. Yes. And they have been here all week. We went to a gathering and they look as good now as they did a week ago. They're just the most beautiful bouquet. So let's have a sip, okay? And let's test it. I don't know about you, but I feel like I need a cup of tea today. Very nice. These are little cups. These are little Demitas cups. And I'm going to show you a cup and plate that I had wanted to use today, but this is what I use for Thanksgiving for my family. And I've just collected these over the years. They're Johnson Brothers from England, and you can find these. Not all of mine match. There's all different scenes with brown china, but if you look close, they have the leaves and the acorn around the edge, and then the house, and they're called Heritage. They all have different names, and then here is the cup and saucer that goes with it. And it has the same beautiful kind of house barn on it. And I just kind of fell in love with brown china. I saw it once at my little thrift shop I go to, and it was, they were just practically giving it away. It was after Thanksgiving, and I got a few pieces and then found a few more. And one of my special tea girls, one of the inspirations of this, Elizabeth, she came to my house last year for tea, and I served on these brown plates, and she was so inspired. She went out looking around her little thrift shops up in Seattle and Bellevue, and she found the most phenomenal set of kind of an eggplant purple, but it's all scenes of America and the Mayflower and the Pilgrim's Landing. And then it goes into, I believe, Lexington, and goes into George Washington and the colonial days. And there are all these beautiful scenes, and it's English china. Isn't that interesting? The British came around for us and honored us with this beautiful china depicting American scenes. Well, they were all British people that came originally, so it's understandable, right? Yes. Well, for our little treat, we're not having much because we're getting ready for a big Thanksgiving meal this next week, so we're trying to be very moderate. So I thought gingerbread cookies with icing, homemade, would be very nice. Lots of spice. I quadruple my spice, cloves, ginger, and cinnamon, and I triple the vanilla, and I find that really gives the flavor. And you know, the spice cookies get better with age when they sit in a airtight tin. I think the tin is the best to keep it in. Yes. I'm kind of far away from you today because I've got all my design here, and I wanted to show you this this pilgrim lady. She's so special, and I don't know who made these, but see how special she is. And then my Indian Sacagawea, she is carrying wonderful squash. I call her Sacagawea. I know Sacagawea was later. Squanto was the Indian that helped the pilgrims so much. He taught them how to plant and how to use fish and how to make popcorn. Well, you know, the pilgrims really suffered. They paid a high price. I believe half of them died the first winter, and we owe a lot to them. They were coming to America for religious freedom. They wanted to be able to worship God, and they loved the Bible. They had the Bible, and on the boat they had the, and it was the Geneva Bible, which was actually translated by British people. but they had a king and a queen that were quite impossible, and they did not want anyone having their own Bible in their own language. And so they had to flee to the continent and go to Geneva and work there with the group of Reformed people that Calvin had established. And actually that Bible was really, the translations were done by William Tyndale and Coverdale, and then the Geneva Committee. And then another Bible was translated in England, of course, the King James Bible, right? Very similar time. But I believe the Pilgrims had the Geneva Bible on the boat. And then all of the Pilgrims later, within 40 years, they would have had the Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan and the Fox's Book of Martyrs, which was like a history book that told all the story of Christianity from the time of Christ to their time. And, you know, we don't realize, but they actually had martyrs in England. There were people burned at the stake for wanting to freely worship God in their own way. You know, the Protestant Reformation had happened in England, in Germany. In 1515, Martin Luther nailed his theses on the door of the Wittenberg Chapel, and he had been, you know, an Augustinian monk who had searched his soul and was very sincere, a brilliant monk, and he wanted to know God. And he tried to do everything the church told him. He went to Rome, he climbed up the steps on his knees, and he even flagellated himself. That means he kind of beat himself, and nothing worked. And then an old priest said, "Martin, I'm really worried about you. You know Hebrew, you know Latin, and you know Greek. You can read the Bible." And so Martin Luther started reading the Bible. Well, then he came to the book of Romans, and this verse just jumped out of the page. It said, "The just shall live by faith." He thought, faith? You mean not works? I don't have to earn it? I don't have to do something to receive this salvation gift that God promised me? He became so happy and so filled with joy, he could not stop singing and preaching, and he got in trouble. And he had to flee and hide out in the Wartburg Chapel. And then he translated the whole Bible into German and literally created a written German language they had never had. And within one generation, you went from illiteracy, where people could not read or write. I think I talked about this before, where life in the Middle Ages was like a chessboard. You had the king and the queen and the bishop. They had all the power, and, you know, the Holy Roman Empire. And then you had a lot of serfs or pawns. And that's why it was like a chessboard. But once the Bible came in their language, Martin Luther said, we need a school in every town. We need a library in every town. Every child needs to learn to read and write. And the Bible was their main book. Overnight, the world changed. And that's called the modern world. In fact, in my history book, when I was in University of Alaska, my third year of college, I had a Western Civ class. And, you know, you start way back, Babylon, Assyria, we start at the very Egypt, Greece, Rome. And then, you know, you have the birth of Christ. Well, that's BC AD. Then the next big thing is 1515, when Martin Luther nails the theses and the Protestant Reformation happens. And at the same time, you have in southern Italy, in Florence, the Renaissance happening. So you have the Renaissance in the south and then the Reformation in the north. That divides old world, new world. Right there, that's a dividing point, because people went from being illiterate and really stuck Born a serf, die a serf. But out of this Bible going to the people, literacy happened, and people are suddenly, the middle class emerges. People have faith, they have belief, they have strength, they have courage, they get confidence and independent thinking, individualistic. That is why the Pilgrims came. You would never have had the Pilgrims coming in 1620, 100 years after the Protestant Reformation, if you had not had the Reformation, which gave them their own Bible, their literacy, their ability to think for themselves and know that they had a right also. That's where our concept of justice, fairness, it goes right back to the Bible. And it even goes back further in England. It goes to the Magna Carta, 1215, where, King John was forced to sign that if you're born on English soil, you're free. And that meant that no one was higher in God's eye than anyone else. The ground was level at the cross. That's from Christianity, and that's from the Bible. Well, I think of that because I've been studying Reformation, Renaissance, and now I'm in the 1600s in my history lectures. And this 1600s is so big. You have the Protestant Reformation, you have the Puritans, you have the Pilgrims, you have the preachers, you have the writers, you have a lot of P's there. It's kind of easy to remember. But I would say that these wonderful pilgrims, they would never have ventured out in a bathtub-sized boat going to an unknown land if they hadn't had a real drive inside and a real faith to believe that God was with them. Yes, and before they ever landed, before they ever had the first Thanksgiving, they made an agreement in their Mayflower called the Mayflower Compact in the boat. They drew it up and signed their names and said, this is a covenant. We will all live our lives with as much obedience to God and His word, and to help one another, to take care of one another, and to live a proper life. And that is called the Mayflower Compact. That is the first document that began America. Isn't that beautiful? Well, I look back at my Thanksgivings growing up. I'm sure many of you look back at yours. And I remember so clearly, I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. And we were members of a very large church, a wonderful church. And every Thanksgiving morning at 10 o'clock, the whole church would gather for a service. And that's really, the word holiday really comes from holy day. It comes from the Middle Ages. It comes from this concept, a special day set apart for families and friends and to honor God. So we would go to church, a very happy service. We would sing the Thanksgiving hymns, and everyone would go forward with cans of food or a food item, and it would all be piled in the front to, give to the poor. And then afterwards, they would have coffee in the foyer, and you would see friends you hadn't seen coming back from college, and different people coming home. And it was very special, just a 1 hour, very simple service. Well, then we would go straight over at 12 noon to the Lincoln Bowl. My high school in Tacoma, Lincoln High School, had this beautiful natural bowl. Now, Stadium High School in Tacoma also has a bowl. These really unusual. I grew up with it. I didn't know how unusual it was. But a bowl is where you sit, all the seats are on the side, and you watch the football game. Well, that was 12 noon, and that was homecoming, and you would see a lot of friends there and different people you hadn't seen. It was so fun. I looked forward to that. And then we would go home and have dinner about 3 o'clock. And sometimes we would have some relatives come. I remember my grandmother would come, and it was very special. And my mother, her family lived far away, and so she did it all by herself. She didn't really have, she did the homemade pumpkin pies, homemade bread, homemade dressing, homemade everything, and it was so special. And we would have the best china and sit down as a family, and it was just a very meaningful day. And then often friends would come later in the evening. And you know, this is before the days when you had football on TV. We actually went to the live football. I was thinking about that because later on, football on TV came, you know, for Thanksgiving, which is nice too. Well, anyway, I am very grateful to God for my memories of Thanksgiving, and I'm sure you have your special memories of Thanksgiving. And it is a holiday that is for us to really stop, pause, and thank God for all our blessings, because we have so much. And to remember those who really, you know, paid the price for us to have this wonderful, wonderful privilege. And I really hope you are all having a good Thanksgiving wherever you are. I pray you will be blessed and happy, and that you can maybe have a little cup of tea also with someone special this next week. Maybe have a little friend in, or go to them and bring a little something spicy is nice to eat, and have a little tea together before Thanksgiving. Well, we say thank you to the Pilgrims, and we say thank you to God for all the goodness He's given us. And I will really, really look forward to seeing you next time.